The next array function we'll have a look at is called ArrayMap. So in search, let's type array_map, hit enter. And what it does, it applies the callback to the elements of the given arrays. For the description, you can see it returns the array. It takes the callback function, which we'll discuss in just a moment, and then it takes a number of arrays. It can be just one or more than one array, basically. And if we look at the description here, ArrayMap returns an array containing all the elements of array 1 after applying the callback function to each one. The number of parameters that the callback function accepts should match the number of arrays passed to the array_map function. Now, if we look at the parameters, we've got a callback function to run for each element in each array, and then array 1 and array to run through the callback function. Then obviously we have variable list of array arguments to run through the callback function. So let's go back to our editor, and if we just remove what we've got here, and what I'm going to do is start with we're not going to be defining any keys for the time being, and this is true. I'm just going to change to German, and then we remove the other two as well. So we are basically left with the default indexes, obviously numerical indexes for this array, and just these five languages. So what we're going to do now is create a new variable, native language, for instance, languages, let's put it. And then that's probably better. Okay, and then we use this array_map function, and I'm going to put it on new lines basically. So the callback will be just a function, and we're going to be passing just one array, so we only need one argument basically for this callback function. So I'm just going to call it item. Then two curly brackets, then comma after this, and our array languages. So as you can see, this is our callback, and this is our array, which we're passing as a second argument to this ArrayMap function. And what I'm going to do inside of this callback function, I'm going to simply return in between the double quotes, my native language is, and then in between the curly brackets, because we are inside of the double quotes, I'm going to wrap our variable item, because what this item argument here is basically the value from this array, because it goes through each item in this array and returns the value as this item. Basically passes it to this callback function as the argument. So if we now, I'm just going to uncomment this block underneath and just pass this new array, which has been returned by applying this ArrayMap. If we save it, go to the browser, and if we go to our course, refresh it, and as you can see, what we did for each item in this array, we applied this callback, which basically create a sentence, including the item, basically the value of this array within this sentence itself. So that's basically how we can run through all of the items in the array and modify the value. Let's now create another array. I'm just going to basically duplicate this one, and the first one I'm going to rename it to countries. And I'm going to change this to England, France, Germany, Spain, and Poland. And now we have matching corresponding languages in the second array, obviously, as we had originally. Let's now pass two arguments basically to this two arrays. The first one will be the countries. So I'm just going to pass countries and then languages. And for the callback function, remember, callback function obviously has to have as many arguments as there are arrays passed to this array map. So we need to obviously, now this time I'm going to call it country and language. And what I'm going to do here, returning the value, what we're going to do is just say the official language in, and then we pass the country is, and then language. And there we go. That should create a nice sentence for us. Let's now try and preview everything. Save it, obviously, and preview everything in a browser. refresh the page, and there we go. The official language in England is English, France is French, and so on. So as you can see, we can pass as many arguments, obviously, as we want. We can create another array and pass it through as well as a third argument, and then make sure that obviously this third argument is here as well within this callback function, representing the value from this third array. So that's how you would do it with just a inline anonymous function, which doesn't have any name. Basically, it's just a function keyword, reserved PHP keyword. But let's have a look at how we can also do it using, if we just try and let's say copy this one, and I'm just going this callback function, I'm just going to create a variable and call it, say, official language equals, and now I'm basically pasting this function which I just copied from this callback, because we are defining the function this way, assigning this function with basically applying this function to this variable. We need to place the semicolon after all this. We go through the functions later on. We've got a whole chapter dedicated for the function, so don't worry too much about it right now. It's just basically show you different ways that you can actually use this callback function with the ArrayMap. So now that we have this function associated with the variable, all we need to do is basically pass this variable function, because that's what it's called now. This is the variable function. As the first argument, as you can see, it looks a little bit neater, obviously. And if we try the same thing, if we now save it and preview everything in the browser, refresh, nothing changes, everything works exactly the same way as before, but we have it structured in a little bit better way. Obviously, now we can reuse this variable function in many other calls, in many other places. When it's been just the anonymous function associated with this ArrayMap, basically as an argument, then obviously it would only apply to this function. But if we, for any reason, need to use the same function somewhere else, we wouldn't be able to, unless we obviously redefine it, basically duplicating the code, which isn't good approach for any programming language, basically. That's one of the ways. So this is the variable function now, because we associate this function with the variable, or we can simply define the new function. So it's a function keyword, and then we just give it a name, official language, for instance. And that works the same way. The only difference is when we are passing this function now to the ArrayMap, what we need to do is just copy its name, or basically type its name in between a single or double quotes, like this. And if we save it, you'll see that that's going to work precisely the same way as the previous two examples. So if we go back to our editor, we can also pass null for the callback, which means basically we're not going to be applying any function to it. If I pass null, what's going to happen is basically these arrays will be combined. If we save it and preview everything in the browser, have a look at this, it combined England with English, France with French, and so on. So it's array of the arrays. As you can see, we have multi-dimensional array here, obviously. So it combined values from the first array with the values from the second array, creating new arrays out of them. So that's how it works when the callback function isn't defined, if it's just null. Now, as you have probably noticed, we only have access to the values of the array. But what if we go back to what we had before, EN for English, we had FR for French language, then for German we have DE, for Spanish we have ES, and for Polish we have PL. What if we have multi-dimensional array and we actually want to work with keys as well? Well, there is a simple way of doing this. What we need to do is basically, I'm just going to remove this previous counters because we don't need this array anymore, and I'm just going to work with one array. Now, what we need to do is basically, in order to obtain just the keys of the given array, there is a function called array keys. So what we need to do is, first of all, wrap the languages array with array underscore keys. Wrap it like this. So this will return just the keys of this array, basically EN, FR, D, ES, and PL, and then pass the languages array on its own, in which case we obviously going to have the values of this array. So we've got keys in the first instance, in the second instance we have values of this array. So I'm just going to use the anonymous function again, two curly brackets and two arguments, because we are passing two arrays, one obviously keys and the other values. First one, I'm just going to call it key, and the other value this time. And we can obviously return whatever we want to do. For instance, we can say, in between the brackets again, key, which will be basically the code, the short code basically for the country, is a country code for, and then value. And if we now save it all, and let's preview everything in the browser, refresh it, there we go. EN is a country code for English. It should actually be England, France, and so on, countries rather than languages, but you get the idea. So that's basically how it works when you actually want to obtain the keys of the given array. You just use this array keys function as well. I can see here, obviously I've misspelled this code. So that's how we can do it using custom function, but we can also pass the built-in PHP function as the callback function to this array map. So let's just remove this and replace it with bool val. This specific function has been introduced in PHP as of version 5.5. So if you're running lower versions, you won't be able to run this example. What it basically does, it converts any data type, any value that you pass through as an argument to Boolean representation. You may remember we have been discussing data casting earlier, so obviously you should roughly know what value is going to be cast to what sort of Boolean representation. I'm going to remove from languages, I'm just going to remove all these values and put 1, then second item will be 0, then we're going to have a simple string, then we're going to have an empty string as well, then empty array. Obviously, as you may remember, square brackets or array this way is precisely the same. And then array with 1 item in it. So what it should obviously cast to 1, as we know, anything larger than 0 when it comes to the integer value is going to be cast as true, larger or smaller basically. If it's a negative, you may remember -1 will also be true. 0 obviously is false. String, it's going to cast to true. Empty string false, empty array false, and then array with some items declared will be true as well. So let's see if that's how it works. If we save it, preview everything in a browser, refresh the page, and there we go. Expects 1 parameter to given. Of course, I've forgotten to remove this array keys function here. We only need to pass 1, obviously, array, because that's the only array we have here, and this function only takes 1 argument anyway. So make sure that whenever you pass in the callback function, obviously, that you match a number of arguments with the arrays you're passing through as well. So if we save it again and preview everything in the browser, refresh, and there we go. Because we are printing basically whatever we got from this array map function. That's why we obviously see 1. This is literally false. Basically 1 is for true. Obviously nothing, empty string is for false. But if we go back to our editor and rather than print r, let's use var underscore dump. Now we're going to see actually exactly what data type is returned. So if we save it and refresh, preview in the browser, obviously, then we go for the first value, which was number 1, was true. For 0 is false. For the string is true. For empty string is false. For empty array is false. And for a non-empty array is true, as we obviously already knew.